Hello and welcome to the third and final video in this mini series. I absolutely love this class and most people love this too. It's fascinating. We're going to take a little peek into the world of the primary health system, which is our really fascinating part of human design. It's going to tell us so much information about our child. There's a lot more to learn, but let's dive in and take a little peek. So hopefully you've seen the other two classes. We started off with parenting by human design, the basics. Then we moved on to looking at emotions with little people, big feelings. Today, we're looking at nourishing our kids' brains and bodies. So it's a little peek into how your children are designed to eat, sleep, and learn so that you can support their needs to thrive. This is just a little part of it because this is such a deep and complex topic, but I really hope that this is going to just give you a little taste for it, pun intended. So when you digest properly according to your determination, no matter what you take in, if you digest properly, either according to conditions or circumstances that are part of your design, then you're going to take precisely the nutrition that you need, and you're going to give that nutrition to those areas of your brain system that support your difference. This is what dietary regimen is all about. This is intended for children coming into the world. It is intended to be their dietary regimen for life. It's what's going to give them the advantage of increased neural activity and neural expansion in their first 7 years. It's going to provide them with a healthy system that's going to be guided by a very strong and very healthy sensory system. So human design was actually designed to be given to children. A lot of the time it's used with adults. People maybe resonate with it or they don't. And then we realize, oh my God, like I'm not really in alignment with stuff. Oh, help, like what do I do? I need to decondition. When we're working with children, it's really important. This part of the primary health system is specifically important for children because of exactly what Ra says here. Now, I want to say if your child is already past 7 years, it's not too late. You haven't failed. I'm not here to bring in any parental guilt. That's the last thing that I want to do. There's still things you can do. There's always things you can do. It doesn't matter when you find human design. Yes, it's ideal if you find it from birth. It's ideal if you understand it from birth. The second best time is now. Okay. If you haven't had this information in the first 7 years, it's not your fault. Like, that's okay. You haven't done anything wrong. Again, you did the best that you could with what you had at the time. There are still things that you can do now. It doesn't mean that like you've damaged your child or anything. I really want you to understand that that's not where I'm coming from at all. Okay. You can still do things with your child now. You can still start to recognize all of these parts that we're going to go through in this class today. You can still start to implement these now, even if your child is older than that. Okay. It just helps if we can do it, the earlier, the better. Certainly, I still had an enormous amount of change in my life through the time in which I've, used human design. And I was almost 30 when I found it. So it's still possible. Okay. It doesn't matter if your children are over 7. So the primary health system, or PHS, is a part of the chart that is some of the deeper layers. It's what's called the deeper substructure. It offers incredible insights into how an individual is uniquely designed to thrive and what their brain and body require for optimal nourishment. This does affect their learning potential as it's directly related to brain development. It's part of the deeper layer, the substructure, and it's especially important in parenting young children so they don't become unhealthily conditioned. As I said, please refrain your not self-critical mind from telling you that you've done anything wrong. Please just absorb this information and know that you're learning this information now and you can do something with it now. So there are 3 parts that we're really going to go into today. There's the determination or digestion, which is to do with the brain. This is sometimes also known as dietary regimen. This is the part that shows us how the body wants to be nourished in terms of, not necessarily what we eat, but kind of how we're taking something in. This is going to be looking at the top left arrow and the number that's alongside it. I'm going to go through the exact placement of these step by step, so make it really easy for you to understand. We're then going to look at the cognition, which is another part of the brain. This is often described as our super sense, and it gives us a sense of what's correct for us or not, whether that might be food, people, places, opportunities. It's not something, it's a super sense, right? So it's not something that's logically explicable, but it's like an awareness that we have. And it's like a heightened sense that we have if we're eating correctly. Then environment, this is really about the body. This is the second part of the primary health system. This is shown by the bottom left arrow and the corresponding number or color alongside it. Now, don't take environment literally. If you read that you or your child has a caves environment, don't go and live in a cave unless you particularly want to. There's aspects of it. Again, I'm going to go through this step by step. So this is where the body feels most alive or most comfortable. So these are the parts of the chart that we're going to be looking at today. If you've pulled your chart from my site, it's going to look something like this. We're going to be looking at the both of these arrows. So on the left-hand side, okay, so the direction in which the arrow points, we're then going to be looking at this big number here and this small number here and the big number here. We're not going to be looking at this small number here, okay? So we're going to be looking at the digestion, which is the big number. It's shown here by number 4. We're going to be looking at the cognition, which here is called a design sense. That's the small number here. So in this case, it's number 5. And we're going to be looking at the color or the number of environment. So that's going to be the big number here. Okay. So I'm going to go through these again. As we look at each part, I'm going to bring back this chart and go through each part step by step so you can really see where it is. Because I know that, again, this is quite a lot to take in. I'm going to make it as simple as I can. So when we're looking at eating, okay, we are looking at how our brain is designed to take things in. It's not necessarily what we eat, it's often the conditions or circumstances in which we eat. So, Ra has said before, you could be eating like, a burger, or you could be eating like a watermelon. And how you take that in depends on whether you are eating in alignment with your correct determination or digestion or dietary regimen. So the first thing we're going to look at is whether somebody has an active or passive brain, whether the arrow is facing to the left or to the right. We're going to be looking at the 6 colors, which are the digestion. We're going to be looking at the 6 tones, which is the cognition, or written in this case as the design sense. We're then going to be looking at the environment. We're going to be looking at the body. This tells us where our body feels best for optimal digestion. We're going to be looking at the direction in which the arrow is pointing, whether it's to the left or the right, which tells us whether someone is designed to be observed in their environment or an observer in their environment. And we're going to be looking at the 6 colors, which tells us the type of environment that is best for us or our kids. So first, get the chart, your chart or your child's chart. Look at the top arrow on the left side. Is it facing to the left or facing to the right? So I'm talking about this one here at the top left arrow. Is that arrow facing to the left or is it facing to the right? If it's facing to the left, this is someone with an active brain, with active determination. If it's facing to the right, this is someone with passive brain, passive determination. These are very different. I put some little fun pictures here because I'm quite a visual person and it helps me to remember things like this. So if we're looking at kids, because this is really what this is about, this might be a child that has just eats a lot, like eats like a horse. That's a kind of a British saying that we might say. Or facing to the right, they eat like a sparrow. They're just kind of like picking at things. Okay, I was told that when I was a child, and guess what? I have passive digestion. I have passive brain. Okay, so it's really, really interesting for me to reflect on things that and remembering that I was kind of told as a child. I'm like, well, that makes total sense. Now I know that. I want you to, like I've said before, I want you to bear in mind that while I'm teaching these things to you, I'm having to take them in isolation for the purpose of being able to deliver the information to you. I want to remind you just again that we can't really do this with human design and just kind of take something as gospel because we find one part of the chart. We only really fully understand someone's human design when we read the whole chart and we take in the nuances of all these things, because there can be things that contradict one another or conflict with one another. So again, with all the information that I'm giving you, when I'm bringing a part out of the chart, when I'm zooming into something, you need to remember that we need to zoom out again and be able to look at the whole picture. So if something doesn't seem right, then it could be because there's something else that's conflicting with it. Okay. So typically, someone that has left-facing arrow, active digestion, active brain, they typically need regular feeding. Okay, they should always be busy digesting. Now, this doesn't just apply to what we're eating, it's anything that we're taking into our brain, because this is all about the brain. So it's, being around people, we're taking things in, learning things, we're taking things in, playing, we're taking things in, but they should be busy. Their brain needs to be busy. Okay, so they could be busy playing, or they could be busy eating, they could be busy doing things, they could be busy eating, but there's this busyness that's going on all the time, this active brain. The brain needs to be busy doing things. So if you have a child with active determination and you as a parent think in your conditioning they're eating too much. I want you to become aware of when your mind tells you things, because that's almost always going to be conditioning that you have picked up from something or someone around you, whether it's in your own childhood conditioning, whether it's something you've read or you've seen or you've heard. If you have a thought, they're eating too much, like a judgment or something, just stop yourself and just consider, just pause and just consider that. Now, obviously, if you have a child that is just kind of like consuming bowl after bowl of ice cream, like I'm not suggesting you just let them do something like that. But if they have a healthy appetite and they seem to want to eat a lot, and you think they're eating again or they're eating too much, can you trust them? Can you trust them to trust their body? So a child with active brain, active determination is likely to have a healthy appetite. So my son has this, I make sure there is plenty of healthy snacks available. Obviously, if he has an ice cream and he's like, I want another one, I'll set a boundary around that and be like, we're just having one ice cream, but you can have, banana or this or some fruit or a rice cake or whatever if you want. Okay. It's not saying you just let them consume vast quantities of everything, but ensure that the healthy snacks available. Like something else with this, like if you have a child with active brain and you're like, well, no, dinner's going to be ready in an hour and I don't want you to spoil your appetite, you can't have a snack now, you have to wait for dinner. That might be challenging for a child with active brain because they need to eat when they need to eat. Really, this is all about allowing our children, regardless of which one they have here, to trust their bodies. Okay, and for them to communicate to us what their body is telling them. Because we can't say if our child is hungry or not. We can't say if they need to eat now or if they can wait an hour. This is all conditioning that we have about what's correct. So for a child with active brain, limiting food can actually damage their brain function. They kind of go almost into like they can freak out a little bit because they need that constant busyness. They need to be constantly digesting something. Now, of course, you could try like saying, oh, you can go and play for a bit and then I'll let you know when dinner's ready. Again, it's up to you. It's your child, it's your experiment. But, allowing them to have a snack. Yes, if you allow them to have a healthy snack, you allow them to have some carrot sticks or something like that, they may still eat their dinner. Like I get it. It's challenging. Like if you spend ages cooking a meal or something like that, and then the child wants a snack and then they don't eat their meal. But I just want you to consider what the bigger picture is here. The fact that like so many of us as adults have so much disordered eating, not necessarily eating disorders, but disordered eating. There's so much conditioning around food. And I really want you to start to become even more aware of the conditioning that we have around food and the conditioning that you have around food. If your child has right-facing arrow, so if the arrow is facing to the right, they have passive brain, passive digestion. They may be slackers, they may be grazers, they may not want to eat sometimes. They generally need breaks from feeding, need breaks from digesting. It's not healthy for them to be constantly doing things, to be constantly digesting. They need to rest a little bit more. This is why we can see a conflict in, like, let's say, for example, you have a generator child, right? And you read something of generators have to be busy all the time. Well, if they've got passive digestion, not necessarily. Yeah. You might have a manifestor child or a projected child with active digestion, with active brain. They're maybe going to be busier. This is just one example of where things can kind of conflict one another. So if you have a child with right-facing arrow with passive digestion, they need breaks from digesting. Okay, they need to just be able to rest. Their digestive system, their brain needs to rest. So you might think, for example, and it's particularly interesting to then look, do you have the opposing one to your child? Like, I'm passive digestion, my son is active. I know that. And so I might not be hungry for ages, right? But I'm asking him, let me know if you're hungry. Are you hungry? Do you want a snack? Because even though I'm not hungry, I know he's different to me. So it's interesting to see where you're different from your child. So if you, for example, are active digestion or you've been conditioned to kind of be that way and you have these regular meals and whatever it might be, you might think your child in your conditioning isn't eating enough. Or people might say, oh, they're a bit thin, are they eating enough? People love to just comment on stuff like that around bodies and around food. Again, it's all about trusting that your child knows their body and your child will eat when they're internally directed. If you force feed them, if you make them eat when they're not genuinely hungry, again, this can damage brain function. They want a break from digesting and you're forcing them to digest. Next, we're going to look at the big number next to that arrow. Okay, so that same arrow, that same location, we're going to look at the big number. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So again, up here, the big number next to the arrow. This is if you've pulled the chart from my website. If you've pulled it from somebody else, from another website, it might be slightly different. But you're looking for something that says digestion or determination or dietary regimen, and it's going to give you a description here as well. So you look for the big number, number 4, and it's going to give you a kind of description there. Sometimes it might say nervous, nervous touch. So again, it's going to depend where you pulled the chart from. So it will be one of these 6. Okay, so appetite, taste, thirst, touch, sound, or light. And then it will say either one of these. If it doesn't say either one of these, or it might just say like this, for example. Okay. In the system that I use, it's just going to say, if we look back at this one, it just says nervous. Okay, and it's number 4. You can see also here number 4, so nervous touch. So it's either going to be direct light or indirect light, or high sound or low sound. It depends on the direction in which the arrow is facing and the number that's there. So if you're looking at a chart and it just gives you one of these, then you want to look at which direction the arrow is facing. So if you've got a chart that just says appetite, you want to look to see whether that arrow is facing to the left or the right, the exact arrow that we just went over. Okay, then you can identify it's consecutive or alternating. If it just gives you one of these words, like it just gives you low, that means low sound. Okay, if it just gives you hot, that means hot first. Okay, hopefully that makes sense then. So this is just a brief description for each of them. We're going to focus first on these bottom 3, which are all about the conditions, okay, the conditions of the food. And then we're going to look at the top 3, which are all about the circumstances, the environment in which someone eats. So number 1, color 1, facing to the left. This is consecutive appetite. This is a very primitive digestion. These digestions are moving from being more primitive to more evolved as we go through the numbers from 1 to 6. So consecutive appetite, this is really about eating one thing at a time. People that have appetite determination, whether it's consecutive or alternating, adults hate me when I tell them this because it sounds incredibly boring. But don't shoot the messenger. It's just the information I'm giving with you. You can experiment with it. If you have a child, again, you can hopefully observe this in them as they're young. So these are people that have a primitive digestion system. They are designed really to eat one thing at a time. Okay, so this might look like consecutive, might look like having some meat, some potatoes, and some vegetables or something like that. That's so British. That might be the most British thing I've ever said. And they might eat like all of the meat, then all of the potatoes, and all of the vegetables. Okay, versus alternating appetite might eat like a little bit of meat, then a little bit of the potatoes, and a little bit of the vegetables. Okay, and they might sort of rotate. So again, both of these are a primitive digestion. There's a slight difference in kind of like how they operate, and then also taking into account what we just went through. Someone that's got more of an active digestion, active brain, versus someone's got a passive digestion and passive brain. So eating a lot versus maybe like snacking and grazing. Okay, everything here on the left. So all of these are people that have that active brain. All of these are people that have that passive brain. Okay. We then move on to taste. So we've got open taste versus closed taste. So these, again, are both primitive digestions. These can be seen as being picky eaters, particularly closed taste. Hello. So they often have like just firm favorites. They know if they like something or they don't. Open taste might be open to trying things a little bit more. Closed taste is usually pretty close. They kind of know they're going to like something or they're not before they even taste it. They don't have to taste it. Their body is just telling them that's not for us. We're not going to like that. So this is a child, like Ra describes this as being a child that, you know, that the spoon is coming towards them and the child's like when, you know, when you're weaning a baby, and then they're like, come on, just try a bit, just try a bit, just try a bit. And then they force the spoon in there. And again, the condition of the child. I'm pretty lucky, actually. My both myself and my brother are closed taste. And my mum seemed to intuitively just kind of allow us to eat like that, which is pretty amazing. But we didn't have a great variety of food when we were kids. We were both, yeah, what I'd say is like pretty picky eaters. That has evolved as we've grown up, but I definitely witness this in myself a lot. I will go to a restaurant and I'll be like, my mind will be like, oh, let's have something different. Let's try something new. And then I'm like, same again, please. And like, it's so funny for me to witness it, you know? And if I do eat something that is not correct for me, if I'm kind of like ordering something or making something from my mind, it shows up in my body because like it will show up as discomfort. It'll show up as like a sensitivity. So our body, you know, our body is amazing. It's kind of really designed to show up something when when we're not eating correctly. We then move on to thirst. So thirst is really about, it's about liquids, it's about hydration, it's also about temperature. So it can be about temperature of the room as well as temperature of the food. Okay. Hot thirst, this is basically about color 3 is basically about kind of somebody's internal system. Okay, if somebody has hot thirst, then their internal system is cold, so they need hot things to warm them up. If somebody has cold thirst, their internal system runs hot, so they need cold things to cool them down. Okay, it's also about transforming things in the digestion as well. So hot thirst needs things transformed outside of their body, so generally cooked foods. Cold thirst needs to transform things inside their body, so generally kind of more raw foods. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule. I have a hot thirst son, and we also live in a very humid, hot climate. So he does like to have cold things from time to time, but I kind of just observe him. I take this information and I don't rigidly apply it, right? But I observe it. And I observe also if he has a lot of cold things, how is that kind of affecting him? How does that affect his temperament? You know, I let him kind of choose things that he wants within reason. I don't kind of go, well, you've got hot thirst determination, so you're never allowed ice, you're never allowed ice cream, you're never allowed anything raw. You know, I just kind of offer him things and then I observe. Moving on to the top 3. So these are more about the circumstances in which somebody eats. So touch is very much about the environment, they're sensitive to their surroundings. Calm touch, as it suggests, needs to be kind of relaxed and calm when they're eating. This might be a child that, to be honest, they might do better like eating in their room, for example, away from other people, away from noises and distractions. Nervous touch is one that is quite susceptible to conditioning in a child, because it's typically like a child that likes to take a bite of something and like move around. They need this kind of like stimulation, or they might need some, you know, movement kind of going on in their environment. They might actually do well like eating in like a cafe where there's like lots of things going on. There needs to be some sort of like activity really going on in their environment. Sound, so sound is very much, as it suggests, about, you know, frequencies and sound when somebody's eating. So high sound, you know, often enjoy loud music or particular sounds when they're eating. They might make sounds, they might want to listen to sounds that are really off-putting for other people. Oftentimes when somebody has sound determination, I recommend, like, whether they or somebody else wears noise cancelling headphones, like if it's a child with high sound, they can listen to what they want through the headphones and, you know, not disturb other people around them. Or if it's somebody that's like, you know, it depends what combination you have in your family. Somebody that wants to block out the sound, like if someone's low sound, they might want to have noise cancelling headphones that they're blocking out that sound around them. Okay, so low sound, again, you know, like silence or low sound, or again, they're just sensitive to frequency, so they may want to eat by themselves. And then we've got light, so direct light or indirect light. They're sensitive to light. So direct light tend to eat better during daylight hours or in bright light. They might be more of an early bird type person. An indirect light, again, sensitive to light. They do better when they're digesting after dark or in dim light, you know, in the sort of darkness, not with a bright light over them. They might be a bit more like a night owl. I witnessed this in one of my nephews as well, who was like, you know, asking for snacks before he went to bed. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, because that's completely correct for him. It's just fascinating to see these things just come up naturally in young children. Okay, we're then going to look at the small number, the cognition or the supersense. This again is going to be 1 to 6, so I'll show you where this is now. So we're looking at the small number. Again, we're staying in this same area here. We've looked at the arrow, we've looked at the big number. Now we're going to look at the small number. So on the chart, if you pull this from my site, it's going to say design sense. It might say cognition if you pull the chart from somewhere else. So there are 6 cognitions, okay? And this is, like I've said before, this is like a super sense or like an enhanced awareness that we have. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the determination, with the digestion as well. So these are fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just go through them one by one. So smell, and again, these are starting off with like from 1 to 6 here. So smell, this is someone that's sensitive to smells. They can smell, you know, if a food is kind of like fresh or not. They can smell if someone or something is correct or not. There are certain smells that can make them feel safe or not. They might smell something and you're like, there's nothing there. Like, what are you talking about? But they've got a really heightened sense of smell. So I don't know, like, let's say, for example, you give them some milk and they smell it and it smells after them and you smell it, you're like, it's fine, just drink it. You want to trust their sense of smell, because this is something that they're super, super highly attuned to. Okay, so don't dismiss it if they can smell something. Again, if they're acting somewhere, if they're acting differently somewhere, like ask them if they can smell something or if something doesn't smell right to them. Taste is a child that's sensitive to taste, or a person that's sensitive to taste. The freshness, texture is going to be really important to them. My son has taste cognition. When I give him something, sometimes he won't eat it, and I'm presuming that maybe it's just not quite fresh enough. They may mouth breathe because they're constantly tasting people and things. So they might have their mouth open a bit. It helps them to make sense of people and their environment. They're literally like sensing things through taste, sensing things through their mouth. We've then got outer vision. These are people that are sensitive to things in their outer vision. So aesthetics, including how food looks, how people look, how things look. They obtain visual stimulations from the surroundings and their environment. Next, we have inner vision. These are sensitive to their internal world. So they have a strong imagination and they can benefit from being in a quiet space free from visual distractions. They might want to kind of close their eyes to heighten this cognition or super sense. We then have feeling. This is people that are sensitive to frequencies, including electromagnetic frequencies. So Wi-Fi, television, all the kind of electrical things that we have. They pick up on subtle energies of people and places, and they know if something just feels off. So they may walk into a room, to you, it might feel totally fine, but they feel some kind of frequency that feels off. And then last but not least, we have touch. These are people that are sensitive to physical touch. They could literally like brush past someone and they could like kind of get a whole heap of information from them. They're really sensitive to physical contact. They have this deep knowing of someone or something from physically touching it. And they have this ability to be able to manipulate energy as well. So that's just a brief overview of these super senses that we have. We all have access to these in some way, shape, or form, but there's one that we all have that is just like this heightened sense that we have. We're now going to look at environment. So we're going to be looking now at the bottom arrow on the left-hand side. Is it facing left or right? So that's this one here. We're just looking at the arrow for now, looking at the direction. Is it facing to the left? Or is in this example, is it facing to the right? It's nice little graphics for you to remember again here. Again, this is something where when we pair this with type, it might give us a little bit of a conflict, okay? If the environment, this is about the body, right? So if the environment arrow, the bottom left arrow is facing to the left, this is someone that's a bit busier. They're designed to be active and doing something when they're in their preferred environment. We're going to talk about the actual environments in a moment, but they should be busy and doing something in their environment. If they're in what appears to be the correct environment for them and they're not, then it might not quite be the right environment, okay? They don't feel supported by their environment. These are people that might prefer routine and structure. So yeah, like I just said, if their activity level drops and they're kind of like really relaxed, they might not feel activated by their environment. They're supposed to feel activated by their environment, like kind of like come alive in their environment, okay? So this is selective caves, internal markets, wet kitchens, active mountains, narrow valleys, and natural shores. They're designed to be observed in their environment, okay? Right facing are observers. Ra called these the couch potatoes, which can be challenging when we're in a conditioned society. We're expected to be busy, busy, busy all the time. And we're designed to be couch potatoes or sleepy sloths. So these are people that are designed to be relaxed and taking things in when they're in their preferred environment. They don't typically like routine or structure. They need something to observe. They're designed to observe, to be the observer. They need something to observe. Their mind might be busy, but if they're pushed to be too busy in their body, then they're susceptible to conditioning. These are going to be people that have either blending caves, external markets, dry kitchens, passive mountains, wide valleys, or artificial shores. So both me and my son are caves environment, but he's selective caves and I'm blending caves. So when we're together in a cave-like environment, I notice usually that he is quite active in his environment, but I will be there watching him. So I'm the observer, he's the observed. So it works quite well together like that. We're both in the same environment. Then look at the big number next to that arrow. Again, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So we've looked at this arrow. We're now looking at this big number here, okay? And it should say environment. Now it might just say kitchens. It might not give you the binary of it, but we can tell that by the direction in which the arrow is facing, okay? Let me show you. So if it just tells you, like one of these, it just tells you caves, markets, kitchens, mountains, valleys, or shores, You can see which one of the two it is by the direction in which the arrow faces. Okay, so going back as we looked here, the direction of the arrow. So this one is facing to the right. So even though this just tells us here, it just says kitchens. Okay, we know the arrow is facing to the right. So we go to this chart. We say, right, we find kitchens. It's facing to the right. So we're looking at dry kitchens. Now, I'm not going to go into the difference between these two binaries here, other than what I have said already, and that one is observed and one is observer. I go into this more in depth in some other classes. For the moment, we're just going to look at the aspect of the environment, okay, and kind of what they're about. So caves is very much about security. It's very much about wanting to feel safe and secure, feeling supported in the body. They have a need to control how other people approach them. Anything behind them can feel invasive. So you think about a cave. Like I said, it's not to take these environments literally, okay? You can, if you want, you might want to go and sit in a cave. But it's basically about having their back protected. So I notice even when I go into a restaurant, I naturally gravitate towards somewhere where I can see who's coming and going. I can see the entrances and my back is protected. So I'll go towards the back of the cafe or a restaurant where my back's against a wall. I will never choose to go and sit in the middle of a restaurant where there's like people all around me and I can't see who's there, because it's all about, you know, feeling supported and controlling how other people are approaching you if you're a caves environment. Markets is all about transactions. So this is people that kind of like to have this interaction, this exchange, this choice. You think about what a market is like. Okay, it's this transaction between two people. Again, they need to feel comfortable in this place. So it's very much about what feels comfortable for them. It can be, you know, the materials of which something is made. It can be like the comfort of cushions. They have preferences about things. So you think about someone going to a market and they're selecting their things that they want from this marketplace. Okay, they like to have some options available, but then they'll select their preferred things. So this is someone that might like to go to a familiar place or be in a familiar, you know, room or a cafe, for example. They need to have some sense of familiarity. This might be a child that wants their favorite things with them. Kitchens is all about transformation. So this is usually a transformative space. You know, it could be a literal kitchen. These are people that like to feel inspired in their environment. They like to be able to experiment with things. If anything is too structured, they're going to feel a little bit like suffocated in it. So they like to have these like different things going on around them. Okay, they like this kind of like busyness quite often. For mountains, this is about observation. So they like to be able to get this bird's eye view. They like to be able to kind of again, imagine being on a mountain or being somewhere high up. So being on an upper level of a house, you know, being able to see things, getting this elevated view about something. They can be sensitive to air quality. So it can be, yeah, good for mountains, people to do things like breath work. Anything too close. So it's kind of the opposite of caves. They kind of want to have this expansive view. If they're in something that's too small and they're kind of like too enclosed, that can feel a bit like claustrophobic or constricted for them. Valleys are all about this kind of like wide expanse. They like to be able to kind of like universalize the energy that's coming around them. So they like gatherings, they like to take in all these frequencies, they like to be in the flow of information. So think about valleys, like all these things are just kind of like flowing through the valley. They're sensitive to acoustics and energies. So again, they might be sensitive to being in a certain place, like it might not feel good for them. Anything too intense in terms of the sound or energy can feel a bit confusing to them. And then shores, this can be natural or artificial. This is very much about being like on the cusp of something. So being in one place, but seeing something else. It's almost like having a foot in two different worlds. It's like being at a window and being in one space, but being able to see another one. They're kind of like looking to what's next. Okay, they could be again sensitive to small spaces. Anything that's too sterile is going to feel confining. They want to be able to, it's not quite like mountains where they want to be able to kind of like sort of see the expanse and see down on something. Shores like to be able to see like what's coming next. So okay, I'm here by the window, but I can see what's outside. Or you know, you could be on an actual shore and you can kind of see you're on the sand and you could see the ocean. So environment can help both when we're eating. So if we're eating in our aligned environment, it can help us again, you know, take in the correct nutrition. It's also really helpful when we're looking at sleep as well. So there are different things that we can do in order to align our child's bedroom environment to help it to be more aligned to their human design environment, like changing where the bed positioning might be, making certain adjustments to the room, perhaps putting them in a room on a certain level of the house according to, you know, what we have available to us. And those are things that we can do in order to help them get more optimal sleep. When we're also looking at sleeping, there are things that we can look at, like understanding whether they have a defined sacral center or not. Because generally, as I've said before, anyone with a defined sacral center needs to use up all of that sacral energy. They need to satisfactorily exhaust themselves and burn off that energy before they sleep in order for them to sleep optimally. Versus if they have an undefined sacral center, so if this center is white or not colored in, they need to go to bed before they're tired and lie down to discharge the energy they've picked up from other people during the day. Human design says that we should sleep alone in order to avoid conditioning. I tend to find that this is more applicable kind of after the age of 7 when the aura develops a bit more. I personally choose to co-sleep with my child. That's a personal decision. There's no right or wrong. I think it depends really whether you and your child are waking up well rested or not. Obviously, there are a lot of things that happen. Sleep is a huge part that can be affected in so many different ways by what we eat, by the environment, by frequencies, by electromagnetics, by nightmares, by conditioning in our sleep. There's an aspect of human design called the dream rave chart, which is a whole other place, but I look at sometimes when I'm looking at children having nightmares. I can look at things that are happening in the sleep. Human design says to sleep alone because it's where we are vulnerable to conditioning. However, I am personally choose to co-sleep with my child. Again, like I said, that's a personal decision. It's not right or wrong. I believe that whatever works best for the parent and child is what's correct for you. Like I said, human design is not a dogmatic system. It's something that you can experiment with that gives you some other information so you can decide what's best for you and for your kids. And these parts of the chart also give us some indications into learning. So this is just a glimpse of the kind of thing that we can learn through looking at these deeper layers of human design. When we look at the determination, like I said, this is about taking things in. So it's not just about the food the child takes in, it's also the information. So a child with an active brain, with the arrow, that top left arrow facing to the left, he's going to want more like constant learning, versus a child with that top left arrow facing to the right is going to need breaks. So this is one aspect that you can consider when you're, contemplating what educational needs your child has. Are they designed to be learning all the time, or do they need breaks? This gives you one piece of the puzzle as to like what might be the best education for them. Their environment, this is about the body. You can use this to enable adjustments to be made to their learning space, whether they're in a classroom or whether they're being homeschooled. If they're a kid with cage environment and you sit them in the middle of the classroom, they're not going to feel safe. They won't be able to concentrate. If you put them in the back of the classroom, they might be able to learn differently. So there are adjustments that we can make according to these aspects and many more of the human design chart. So again, learning is something that is hugely nuanced. I have 2 options where you can find out more about that. I have a program called Educate and also a more in-depth program called Flourish, where you can learn more about learning styles. It's absolutely fascinating, but there are just so many aspects to go into and a lot of things that need to be kind of like brought together in order to understand that fully, rather than just taking parts in isolation. I want to just give you a little bit of example because, like I said, I like to illustrate these with personal examples. So this is my son's chart. He has an active brain. He has hot thirst, determination, and taste cognition. So I've known from the get-go that he's going to probably consume a lot of liquids because him being thirst, determination. We also live in a tropical country in Thailand. However, I've actually noticed he drinks more when we've been in Europe, when we've been in the UK and Europe, which is really interesting. Other people frequently comment, because like I said, people love to comment about food. Very surprised on how much he drinks or how much he eats. He'll often be carrying around 2 or 3 drinks at a time. Now we might go, you've already got a drink, just drink that one first. And you get, no, I allow him to have 2 or 3 drinks, right? It's important for him. Technically, he's meant to consume things above body temperature, but because he's also a 3-5 profile, which we haven't gone onto profiles in here, but this is someone that needs to learn from trial and error, then I just encourage exploration with whatever he responds to. Like if he wants to have ice, I let him have ice. I don't kind of go, no, human design says that you're hot thirsty and you shouldn't have anything cold. I let him just try things. He's a child, he needs to experiment. And I've noticed that like since he turned about 2, his appetite changed a little bit because he's now so focused on playing and he's so into something that he doesn't necessarily need fuel as often from food, as long as his brain is busy, but he will still drink a lot. Sometimes he will, like, but he might, be playing a lot, and then suddenly he's like, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. So I just make sure that I've got things ready for him. And in terms of sleeping, so he's a manifesting generator with a caves environment. So he does have a defined sacral center. Okay, so he needs to use up his energy before he goes to sleep. Generators, manifesting generators, Ra said, are designed to go to bed exhausted with their energy satisfied. He explained it as like they're supposed to kind of like almost drop onto the floor exhausted, like in front of the TV, and then you put them to bed. Like if you try to make them sleep, it can be difficult for them and it can be frustrating for you. It's kind of like a battery that needs to drain out first in order for it then to recharge properly, like whilst they're sleeping. So Rara also said generators shouldn't have set bedtime. So I don't have a set bedtime for my son. I watch for tired cues, and it might vary between like 7 and 9:30, depends on what he's done for the day. He does do well with routine though. His environment arrows faces to the left. So even though the timing of when he goes to bed varies, I try to keep a routine as much as possible of like bath, story, milk, bed. And sometimes he'll indicate to me when he wants to go to bed because he's just kind of like, have milk in the bedroom. So, I'm just kind of also just like, observing his cues and seeing kind of what he needs, and asking him questions. Once they start to be able to communicate with you, obviously asking them questions, you can get more of an indication of what they need. And then with the caves environment, he needs a dark and cozy space. Don't hate me, this may be human design or not, but my son has pretty much slept through the night since he was about 2 months old. Whether it's just his environment, whether it's a combination of things, who can tell? But he's had a supportive environment in terms of his human design since he was born. I happen to also be caves environment, which is helpful. So we have like a dark and cozy room. There's no distractions in there. There's no TV. We just have a mattress on the floor. So it's very kind of like caves like. I dim the lights after the sun goes down. We live in a place where we're pretty much 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of dark. That doesn't change throughout the year, so that also helps. And then caves people need to have their back protected and the bed should be oriented in a room so that they can see the entrances, they can see who's coming and going. So that's kind of how I have it set up as well. And oftentimes when I'm co-sleeping with him, he'll come, so he'll cuddle with me so his back's against me. So that's kind of interesting to observe too. Right, keeping this simple again. So if we're looking at these three aspects, so we're looking at eating and sleeping. Type, anyone with a defined sacral center, that kind of go, go, go energy, they need to exhaust their energy before they go to sleep. For an undefined sacral, they need to know when to rest. So they generally need to go to sleep before they're really tired, before they're exhausted. Looking at that top left arrow, if it's facing to the left, they have that active, busy brain, they often eat more. Or if it's passive, it's facing to the right, their brain needs rest. They might often graze or snack on things. And then the bottom left arrow is observed. If it's facing to the left, so they're designed to be active in their preferred environment. Or they're an observer. If it's facing to the right, they're designed to be relaxed in their preferred environment. This is just like a synopsis of three things. If you kind of want to keep it simple and just focus on these three things and then come back to this information, that you can. I hope you love that. If you're hungry for more, again, pun intended, I have an interactive class with a workbook as well, so that you can go through and really, again, start to map out your differences between you and your child. Really helps to see where you're different and to see it in a visual form. So I have a class that's got a workbook to go with it as well, to ask you some questions. It's called Not Your Mini Me. This is really about raising unique individuals, not carbon copies, because your child is a unique individual. They're not a mini version of you. And so I hope you will join me for that workshop too. See you there.